In security matters, the worst-case cyber scenario. For years, top defense officials and Hollywood have envisioned a massive cyber attack on critical infrastructure. It could shutter financial institutions, collapse the power grid, freeze mass transit, and poison the water supply. An attack like that would take incredible coordination. Some consider it unlikely, but a new question has emerged. Is our nation prepared for a cyber Pearl Harbor? Joining me with some answers is Patrick Tucker, technology editor for Defense One. Well, Patrick, 20 years ago, this might have been described as a crackpot theory. Today, it's a relatively mainstream concern. Defense Department Chief Information Officer Terry Halvorsen addressed the issue just last month at a breakfast hosted by the Christian Science Monitor.
Is there the potential for a cyber Pearl Harbor? Probably. I think it will depend on what scale of engagement you're going to have. In kind of the normal phase zero, yeah, I think there will be persistent cyber probing. There'll be persistent testing of cyber threat technology. I think that is something we're going to live with. I don't think, again, that should surprise us.
There's been a lot of talk about that term, Patrick, cyber Pearl Harbor. Is it fear-mongering?
Well, it depends on who you ask. Certain intelligence officials, Director of Intelligence James Clapper, Cyber Command Commander Michael Rogers, and others have said that large nation-state peer nations like China or Russia possibly have the capability to launch an attack like that, where they cripple some aspect of infrastructure, potentially resulting in loss of life. At the same time, others have said that that sort of attack is unlikely as a first attack, as a kind of surprise attack in a Pearl Harbor sense, that a major cyber attack on civilian infrastructure is more likely to be the result of ongoing hostilities between U.S. and China. So we would already be in a war before you saw something like this. This is sort of a Peter Singer argument, if you will. Meanwhile, some, such as former NSA head Keith Alexander, have come up with the alternative scenario. They say that it's most likely to be a first attack and it's going to be a surprise. Now, Keith Alexander, since retiring from the NSA, has also started a cybersecurity film, vending solutions to these sorts of problems. So there are a lot of people with a lot of software to sell to fix this. Exactly how likely it is, that's a very different question, and it's sort of impossible to nail down.
Not only has it become practical warfare, it becomes psychological warfare. Can you imagine not being able to use your cell phone, get to your bank account? I mean, the ideas are just boggling. Mm-hmm. Now, the Department of Defense has a cyber strategy in place for any attack of significant consequence. Tell us more.
In April of this year, the Department of Defense published a sort of grand cyber strategy, and it outlines DoD's role in protecting its own networks, in giving backup to troops that are conducting cyber operations. The third goal is to provide backup in the event of a major, a cyber attack of significant consequence on U.S. infrastructure. And this is something that DoD has said that's their job to do. But there are some questions, policy questions, about who exactly does what. It's an incredibly difficult and complex knot to unravel.
Now let me drill down to that, because that's my next question. Let's talk about if the power goes out. Who's in charge? DoD, DHS, or a combination of the two?
Technically, DHS takes the lead. DoD provides backup. But then when you look at something like cyber, there are a lot of other questions that have to be asked in concert with that. And this is why Lieutenant General James McLaughlin, who is the Deputy Commander of Cyber Command, has said that the realization of the third goal in the cyber strategy, exactly how to provide that backup to civilian authorities, that is the one that they've made the least amount of progress on. They are trying. They do a lot of war games involving DHS and other agency actors where they sketch out exactly what would happen, but that's a little bit different from having a clear chain of command. There's nothing formally written down as a doctrine that says in the event of this happening, here's exactly who does what. you have this potential for somebody like Jay Johnson, the head of DHS, to be in charge of somebody like Admiral Michael Rogers, the head of Cyber Command. And the question becomes, is the head of DHS qualified or authorized to command Cyber Command to unleash cyber offensive attacks against China or Russia, shut down power there, perhaps cost civilian life over there? So these are a lot of political policy questions that, despite a lot of hard work on the part of all the parties involved, still have to be answered.
Well, true. And you're fighting with guns or you're fighting with bits and bytes. So what's the answer here, Patrick? New legislation, a simple rebranding, or major structural changes to DOD and DHS?
More work, more rehearsing of what actually happens is probably in order. Probably the construction of some sort of formal document that clearly outlines exactly who is in charge of what, delineates what a cyber offensive capability is and who gets to call for it. I think that that would probably be a great first step in untangling some of this mess.
Patrick Tucker, technology editor for Defense One. Thanks, Patrick.
Thanks.